Huge drills get underway on Nangan Island, just a footstep from China's shores, as Beijing announces exercises of its own. We meet with the Taiwanese man who fought in Ukraine and is now back home to share what he learned on the battlefield. Also ahead,
Taiwan is inviting people to spend a night at its presidential office building. I'm here to find out why.
Plus,
this wooden tree of life is located in central Taiwan, and they're asking me to jump 10 stories from the top. You think I'm going to do that? I'm not so sure about that.
A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Liao. Nangan, an island that's part of Taiwan's territory and just off Chinese shores, is preparing for civil defense drills. These trainings include raising readiness in case of natural disasters, emergencies, and an attack from neighboring China. Bing Wang reports.
First responders put out a fire on Taiwan's outlying island of Nangan, about 20 kilometers off the shores of China. It's not a real emergency. These people are participating in civil defense exercises. The annual series of drills include preparing for natural disasters. But this year, there were also defense exercises against warfare in case of an attack by China.
紧张也无济于事嘛。那这个的意义的话，就是应该说让大家都保持警戒，这样子，就是不要说生活一天一天过，可能就好像就松懈下来这样。
China claims Taiwan as part of its own territory and has not ruled out the use of force to take the country. That's despite the Communist Party of China never ruling Taiwan nor its outlying islands.
我们要做民安的演习，当然就是希望平时多准备，战时少伤害。目前两岸的情势如果发展在比较升温的时候，我相信我们每一个编组的同仁都知道它的位置跟地区的所有物资的状况是如何。真正开始发生的时候，我们就可以发挥它的效果。
This year's drills come at a time of increased tensions across the Taiwan Strait, where Nangan is situated. China just wrapped up 3 days of military exercises around Taiwan in response to Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen's recent meeting in California with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Nangan's proximity to the Chinese mainland means Taiwan's government is shoring up military strategy on the island.
在战事发生的时候，部队负责作战，我们负责做后援的动作，也就是自己的生命自己救。 自己的家园自己建的这种观念，希望透过我们的能量或物质，对作战有所帮助。
By the end of these civil defense trainings, citizens should be better prepared to face any kind of disaster, whether it be a fire, a major injury, or a Chinese attack. Kama Xu and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
China has announced it will hold more military drills over the coming days. Notices were posted on a Chinese government website on Thursday warning ships not to enter the areas where the drills would be held. They include 2 days of exercises in the northern Bohai Sea, coastal drills near the city of Qingdao, and firing practice in the South China Sea. China has ramped up its military activity in recent weeks after launching large-scale exercises around Taiwan earlier this month. Those were in response to Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen's historic meeting with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in California. There's different wording about Taiwan in readouts from a call between the presidents of France and the United States. The U.S. readout said that the two leaders discussed the importance of maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, but the French version made no direct mention of Taiwan. Some have suggested the difference shows the two countries are not in lockstep when it comes to support of the country. Earlier this month, French President Emmanuel Macron sparked controversy when he warned that Europe should not get caught up in a crisis over Taiwan. EU-Taiwan relations expert Zuza Anna Ferenczi said any U.S. frustration over the French readout needs to be managed.
I think it is in Washington's interest to keep Europe close and to be aligned, but we have to remember that we do have different interests. And the relationship that the US has with China is not the relationship that the EU has with China. The strategic interests are different. The US presence in the Indo-Pacific is not what the EU has or is seeking to have.
A new exhibit examining how war has become normalized for people in Ukraine, particularly Ukrainian women, opened in Taipei on Friday. I was there to get a closer look. A new normal. That's what Russia's invasion has become for Ukrainians. It's something that even Ukrainians living in places as far away as Taiwan can feel, despite not being on the ground.
People in Ukraine, they keep living their life, they keep going to work every day, and they just so used to it.
Life goes on and you can't live under the constant stress. Otherwise, you'll just lose your mind. So people at least try to pretend the life is going on, the life is normal, the life continues as it was before the war.
A new exhibit in New Taipei seeks to showcase that sentiment. When the temporary becomes the ordinary, examines how people in Ukraine have grown used to Russia's invasion through the lens of the women living through it. It looks at women's roles and narratives during the war. One of the groups behind the show is a coalition of Ukrainians in Taiwan called Ukrainian Voices.
作为乌克兰人，我觉得这个展览更加有意义，因为它是可以给那些没有机会被听到的声音提供这样的一个机会，尤其是为那些我们在此也听不到的声音。
These are the voices of Ukraine, of Ukrainian women, of victims of the war, of Ukrainian community in Taiwan. Just a lot of voices and representation of what Ukrainians feel these days.
The exhibit debuted on Friday at Taiwan's National Human Rights Museum. It's organized in collaboration with Ukraine's Museum of Women and Gender History. Taiwan's culture minister attended the opening. He made it a point to be there because he said, in many ways, Taiwan has much to learn from Ukraine.
我也希望这个我们文件馆这边能够多方能够让台湾人民除了关怀关心之外，其实它就像一面镜子，我们要面对我们自己的前途。
Like Ukraine, Taiwan faces threats from a much larger neighbor. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory despite having never governed the democratic country. Beijing regularly says it will not rule out the use of force to bring Taipei under its control. The exhibit reveals the toll war takes on a country's population and how it has no choice but to adapt. For the organizers, the parallels between Ukraine and Taiwan's plight make Taipei the ideal location for this collection to be shown. Just a handful of Taiwanese people have gone to fight in Ukraine. One of them, Zhuang Yuwei, is now sharing the skills he learned on Ukraine's front line with his fellow citizens. Rick Liao reports.
52-year-old Zhuang Yuwei is at an air rifle range, keeping up his shooting skills. Now back in Taipei, the former tour guide spent 8 months fighting against Russian forces in Ukraine.
那我们为了就是第一个我们去那边是为了要去捍卫自由。我认为说没有一个专制的国家可以任意的向一个民主国家去攻击。如果这一点成立的话，那其实像我们台湾也会被侵略啊。
Now, Zhuang wants to pass on what he learned to his fellow Taiwanese. Like Ukraine, Taiwan faces an existential military threat. China sits just west of the island nation, claiming sovereignty over Taiwan and recently upping its intimidation. Chinese forces have recently held war games close to Taiwan and are increasingly sending military boats and planes into surrounding areas. In response, Taiwan has boosted defense spending and increased mandatory military service to 1 year. And Ukraine's civilian response has also inspired Taiwanese. As China ramps up its pressure on Taiwan and conflict becomes an ever more real possibility, a growing number of Taiwanese are coming to places like this one to learn the skills that could help them in the event of war. At this privately run National Defense Shooting and Education Center in the capital, Taipei, Zhuang shares his experience of war and teaches compatriots how to respond to attacks.
我把在乌克兰那边学到的一些战术，就是尤其是有关于小队的那种小的那个规模的小队规模的这种战术，然后分享给他们， 那也跟他们就是一起去跑这种战术啊，因为你知道战术不是说你讲就可以了，而是你必须要就是你知道哦，那你的定位在哪里，你的位置在哪里，那到时候你要怎么样跑，那你要怎么样站，或者你要怎么趴啊。
Zhuang arrived in Ukraine during the battle for the country's capital, Kyiv, and the Ukrainian government paid him 400 euros a month to serve as part of the Foreign Legion. He says he saw Taiwan's own struggle in the Eastern European nation's fight against an authoritarian neighbor.
因为我发现就是台湾人对于战争这种东西，他们对于战争的了解是非常肤浅的。所以我认为就是说，因为你不了解，那你就会害怕。害怕的话，你有可能会采取不当的行动。
For Zhuang, joining the fight in Ukraine was the right thing to do. And based on the lessons he learned there, he's now committed to preparing others back home in case Taiwan faces a similar fate. Ricky and Rick Liao for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwanese chip-making giant TSMC will make chips using advanced 4-nanometer technology at its factory under construction in Kaohsiung. TSMC announced the change on Thursday. The company's original plan was to make chips with the more mature 28-nanometer process. TSMC says that demand for the older chips dropped quickly after it began work on the Kaohsiung plant. It says its planned factory in Japan will still use 28-nanometer technology. The announcement also curbs recent speculation that TSMC is slowing domestic production. That was after the company postponed the Kaohsiung factory plan last week. The White House, 10 Downing Street, and the Elysee Palace, official residences, are usually homes for country leaders alone. But in Taiwan, the government has a different idea. Stash Butler reports.
It's not your typical vacation. Stay a night at Taiwan's presidential office, make a video about it, and maybe even meet the president herself. Taiwan's government has given influencers a chance to do just that. It aims to boost tourism after COVID and put Taiwan on the international stage.
期待这个活动那让经过疫后蜕变更美好的台湾能够让世界看见。
All the guards are preparing back there. It's going to be really cool.
It's the second time Taiwan's running the event after a first run in 2019. The organizers, which include TaiwanPlus, say the videos from that year got over 30 million impressions on social media. After a break over the pandemic, applications for this year opened on Friday, and they'll stay open till the end of June. 10 winners don't get paid for their video, and flights are not covered, but they do get a free night in the building, plus a night elsewhere. Judges are urging people to apply.
It's an amazing building. You never get a chance to spend the night in the White House, but you can spend it here in Taiwan. So.
It may not be the White House, but organizers here are hoping that the building's grand surroundings will grab people's attention and, more importantly, get them to Taiwan, because for international tourism here, it's been a tough few years. The number of tourists arriving in Taiwan peaked at over 800,000 a month before dropping off a cliff as Taiwan closed its borders. International tourism stayed at essentially zero until October last year, when the country reopened. Visitor numbers are still well below their pre-COVID level. But it's not just about tourism. The presidential office is the heart of Taiwan's government. Inviting people here sends a message that Taiwan may not be part of the UN, but it is a country with its own leaders, government, and democratic way of life. Authorities here want influencers to help lift Taiwan onto the international stage. They're betting Taiwan's military standoff with China and the considerable cost of making the flight won't keep people away. Andy Xue and Stash Butler in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, making sure Taiwan has a fighting chance. We take a look at the martial artists getting ready for this year's Asia Games. Stay with us.
And I'm here to take you guys on an adventure of your lifetime. When the country so beautifully encapsulates everything within it, be it their food, their traditions, their arts and crafts, you've got to see it to believe it. Well, welcome to Fun Taiwan.
Every Sunday, 7:30 p.m. on TaiwanPlus.
is the center of Taiwan. For more stories from here in Nantou County, Taiwan, and from around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will meet with U.S. President Joe Biden at the White House on May 1st. U.S. officials say the two leaders will discuss how to deepen economic cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. The announcement comes as the U.S. and the Philippines are in the middle of their largest ever joint war games. The two countries have stepped up military cooperation in recent months. They say China is the biggest threat to regional security. For more on how the Philippines is making plans for possible conflict in the Taiwan Strait, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Aaron Matthew Lariosa, an independent security analyst based in Washington, D.C.
And how significant is the fact that the Philippines is now making contingency plans, emergency plans, for if a conflict were to erupt between Taiwan and China?
It all comes back to the ambassador's comments. He touched on the 150,000 Filipino workers in Taiwan, so that's a really sensitive topic for us. Those are Filipino people. So when he made that thinly veiled threat, a lot of people started being really concerned. It's like, well, do we have a plan? How will we get them out if a conflict occurs, etc.? So yesterday, I believe, or a few days ago, the northernmost province of Batanes, the Armed Forces of the Philippines gave a presentation to government officials there about what would happen, or like what they could do in a Taiwan contingency.
And how are people in the Philippines reacting to more U.S. presence in the country?
So in the Philippines, we're seeing a really interesting dynamic of local government units and local officials and their takes on EDCA. Some people see it as like, this will provoke China, China will target us. But also some governors and some people see it as like an economic opportunity.
What is the significance of the Philippines declining the U.S. Trying to stockpile weapons on these bases?
So the significance, it's a bit of a dilemma for the Philippines, because if we look at the type of weaponry that would be used to defend Taiwan from the United States, and what type of weaponry the Philippines would require from the United States to defend it in the Philippine-U.S. alliance, they're very similar. So where will the line be drawn on what types of weapons could be stored at these sites? It's a very interesting dilemma, and frankly, I think we need to wait and see how Manila decides where this line is drawn. This also plays into the Marcos's balancing act between the United States and China. I'm sure everybody's heard about the recent comments from the ambassador recently, and Marcos has actually said, it might have been lost in translation, it downplays what the ambassador actually said, which is really interesting because it's pretty obvious it was a thinly veiled threat.
That was Aaron Matthew Lariosa, an independent security analyst based in Washington, D.C., speaking to our reporter Jaime Ocon. A trip to a factory sounds like something you might do for work, but there's a factory in central Taiwan that's drawing tourists. Today, Andrew Ryan brings us the final stop in his tour of Nantou County in the latest edition of Where's the County Chief Taking Us?
So far in our trip to Nantou, we've shown you Taiwan's longest and highest suspension bridge, slept in a water pipe next to Sun Moon Lake, and I even met this wooden giant watching over an indigenous Bunun village. But it's the life-size people I've met along the way that are making it an unforgettable trip.
南投县其实是一个民族大熔炉哈，很多的地方可能像南投县在这里有传统的闽南的哈，还有外省的，然后我们在这里还有这个客家族群，然后我们还有这个原住民族群，还有在清境上面的百夷的这个云南的文化，那么另外还有现在的新住民，在南投县不同群体的人非常的多。南投县我们是一个山城，虽然我们是比较保守的地方，可是我们的包容性跟接纳度其实是很高的。
The inclusiveness of the people of Nantou is also reflected in this wooden structure. It was designed by an Australian architect using wood from Austria that was cut by Germans. It uses parts from Italy and Finland, and it was imported by Taiwanese who assembled it right here in Nantou. Ira Wu is the mastermind behind this impressive project.
那这个生命树本身就有3项的世界纪录，因为它是全球室内木结构最大，然后量体最高30.8，然后有一个 ramp skywalk 空调最长，总共有386公尺，哇！所以我们想为台湾留下一些说，让全世界知道说我们台湾人也是有很棒的建筑。
Believe it or not, this is also a working factory. It's the nation's biggest producer of storage containers and toolboxes. It's also a smart factory and a green building with environmentally friendly features. But clearly, it's much more than just a factory. It's a mini theme park.
Whoa, 真的很快呢。
Wu is not only a designer by trade, he's also a fan of extreme sports. You can see that right in the walls of the complex. You can go rock climbing, or storage container climbing, I should say. You can also jump 10 stories from the top of the Tree of Life. Somehow, they convinced me to put on safety gear and slowly walk to the top. I can feel my palms sweating. Why am I doing this again? I feel sick. And then they give me the countdown.
深呼吸，那我们数到3就往前走了，嘿，那1、2、3，走。
哇！哇 ！My God！ 哦，好。Yeah. My God. Whoa. Oh, I have to say, I really hate heights. This is the scariest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Oh, man. I can't even breathe. Hey, Mom, I'm alive. Woo. Gonna have to go sit down somewhere.
I still can't believe I did that. I think there's something about Nantou that has inspired me to take chances, try something new, think outside of the box. Now that's something that Wu is good at, literally thinking outside of the toolbox. The best example of that is located on the 8th floor of his factory, the World Austronesian Center. It's a one-of-a-kind immersive experience and a labor of love. The goal? To help visitors learn more about Taiwan's indigenous roots.
那我们就想要让土地的文化跟价值是整个场域的一个精神灵魂，也是我们继续发展下去的一个底蕴。这样子，这里 right here 是全世界最能认识台湾的地方，这里也是全台湾最接近国际的地方之一。
Before leaving Nantou, there's one last place to visit. An indigenous village with the perfect view of the tallest mountain in Taiwan.
Now, as you can see, it's just a little bit too cloudy to see Jade Mountain today, but if you use your imagination, you look at that V shape behind me, it's a little nub that sticks out on the left-hand side. Now, of course, I'm disappointed, but that's the nature of travel. And the good thing is, it gives us an excuse to come back and visit again someday.
The county chief says the people of Nantou are diverse and inclusive, and she's right. But there's another thing they share in common, their courage. The courage to climb to new heights, to share their hometown and their culture, and to dream big. The same mountains formed by earthquakes, which separate them from the outside world, also give them perspective, putting them head and shoulders above the rest of Taiwan. Klein Wang, Kamashu, Peachy Zhuang, and Andrew Ryan for TaiwanPlus.
Now, for the full series of Where's the Nantou County Chief Taking Us, please visit the TaiwanPlus website. Taiwan has announced its team for this year's Asian Games, including 10 of the country's best martial artists. With preparations underway, Sam Robbins takes a look at the competitors who will be fighting for gold.
These are some of Taiwan's top fighters in martial arts. They are sparring in preparation for this year's Asian Games, taking place in Hangzhou, China in September. The event was delayed by a year due to COVID concerns, but now it's finally getting closer. The practice fights will become increasingly intense. But despite the pressure, the athletes say they're not overly fazed by the competition.
心态上就
以顺其自然，然后稳扎稳打，就是做好自己，那不去在乎输赢这样子。就是我的实力，我能做到哪里就是哪里，我不会去觉得说输掉了很可惜这样子。
Last week, Taiwan confirmed it will send 5 male and 5 female competitors to the Asian Games martial arts events. Gu Xiaoshuang won a gold medal in karate at the last Asian Games in 2018. In taekwondo, Luo Jialing won silver in her division at last year's World Championships. She was beaten to the world title by China's Luo Zongshi, and Luo is getting ready to meet her rival again.
还是会去做影线分析，然后可能在跟训练上的时候，就是请陪练员去做一些他的专长动作，我们去做模拟。
At the last Asian Games in Jakarta, Taiwan claimed 2 gold medals, 2 silver, and 1 bronze. Taiwan's previous gold medalists at the Games have both been women. This year, the team's coach has high hopes for the men too. As preparations continue, the team hopes to break their previous records and fight their way to the top. James Lin and Sam Robbins for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we leave you with images of dancers from around the world auditioning for the Radio City Music Hall in New York. I'm Liao. Take care and see you next time.